welcome everybody to this new episode of the podcast Coffee Breakdown. Today we are here, both me and Aaron, and we have a new guest who is Renato Perillo. Renato is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of California, General Atomics actually, at the University of California, San Diego. And today we share with us his experiences as a researcher. So thank you very much, Renato, for accepting the invitation. I'm very glad that we can have this chat.
Thank you guys for having me. It's wonderful also to see you and, to connect after this couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. Because actually we met at DIFER in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven, where we were all doing our PhD in different topics actually. Yeah. And then now you moved to the US, and I would like to ask you, but maybe to start, what are you doing in the US? If you can describe also your institute, what is the main research that you're dealing with?
So I'm hired by the University of California, San Diego. However, we are on assignment at General Atomics. General Atomics is a mostly private company that runs D3D Tokamak, which is currently the only active experimental fusion machine in the United States. So we are collaborators. So my group, which is led by this legendary guy, Jose Boedo, is from UCSD, but we have offices and we work daily at General Atomics itself. When there are experiments, we have our own little corner in the control room. And, I think it's nice to underline the fact that at General Atomics, there are plenty of collaborators from all over the United States, from UCLA, Wisconsin, MIT, Princeton. So it's really a collective effort to run and to study what goes on at D3D.
Okay, so you're working at this machine, right? D3D. Is it operating now, or is it shut down?
Yeah. We are in full campaign, which started around April, and then we'll go on up to, I think, September. Well, up to the end of October. But in October, we will study negative triangularity stuff, which is pretty cutting edge and interesting. And we will see. As experimentally, my group deals with three main diagnostics, which in short are, so two of them are diagnostics to probe the edge part of the plasma. So the most external parts in the vicinity of the main wall and all the way down at the bottom. They are called reciprocating probes. So you have these very fast probes that goes in and out, and you get radial profiles of important plasma parameters, the temperature, the density, the current, and therefore you can extract nice stuff like the velocity. You can do several things with that. Another diagnostics that we operate, but not me personally, is a fast camera that we use to capture literally images with very high rate during plasma operations. And that is also very important and used for the disruption group, which is different from what we study in terms of the edge of the plasma, but yet we belong to the same UCSD collaboration deal, let's say, with General Atomics.
Okay. So most of the studies, so you mentioned this negative triangularity, that for me is quite a new terminology. Okay, maybe Aaron can help me on that. But so from what I understood, so then most of the studies there are focused, well, maybe not all of the studies, but are focused on this problem of the power exhaust in tokamaks. That is quite a big deal from what I understood. Is it correct?
Yeah,
or?
Well, no, I mean, most of the studies is a bold statement, but let's say lots of efforts are put in that directions. And myself and my group do indeed work on that issue.
Okay.
In particular, so, well, as you well know, fusion has so many subjects, right? So like my boss is well known for having discovered experimentally this so-called blobby transport, where basically these turbulences in the outer part of the plasma leads to a wider heat flux footprints at the floor. In few words, it basically allows the power exhausted to be deposited on a larger area, and therefore subjecting the materials to less stress and to less power loads. However, what I'm really working on is to study the transport and the footprints of intrinsic instabilities that occur in high confinement plasmas. They are called ELMs, stands for edge localized modes. And in particular, you may be aware, or I think anyways is something interesting to check on the internet. There are new experiments that they are designing, for instance, Spark at MIT, but also must upgrade. And these machines will have a magnetic configuration that is called double null or quasi-double null. So basically, there are two X points at the bottom, at the top of the machine. What was, I mean, humbly speaking, but what was a little bit missing was how does the power released by the plasma during these ELMs, during these instabilities, get deposited in these walls according to this magnetic configuration.
Okay, because you want to deposit the power in a specific location, right?
Yeah, ideally, yes. But we still don't
most
know
of the power, of course, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. But in order to properly design a future machine, you really have to understand how much and where this power is deposited. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And funny enough, my first work here, my first paper, actually, I did the analysis on shots that were from 2009, 2010. And we discovered that a significant fraction of that power goes to a very unexpected region of the machine. Bottom line.
And is it this beneficial or not?
Well, how can I say? It's good to know.
It's good. Yeah.
It's good to know.
Okay.
But again, honestly, you know, I'm very much unaware of the engineering part of the material side. We study plasma
it's a huge challenge.
You know, so yeah, basically we provide the experimental evidence and some theory, but then it's up to the engineers to develop, you know, the materials and all that stuff. That is way beyond the scope of our research, but it's very important yet. You know?
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm a bit interested also in that aspect. You say that I guess the heat that comes out from the ELMs is definitely, it's not just straight transport direct to the same, let's say, footprint on the strike points in the diverter. And so this is what you're really looking at. You're trying to see how that changes as the ELMs not just evolve, but maybe also different types of ELMs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Thank you. I mean, Aaron, you exactly got the point. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's very interesting because it isn't sort of an assumption. We don't know how really the ELMs impact that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because,
and do
you know, sorry.
No, go for it.
I mean, it's a highly nonlinear process. So it's very complicated also to properly simulate those behaviors, and also, you know, to experimentally evaluate what's going on. You need really cutting edge diagnostics that we are lucky enough to have here at D3D.
Okay. But I'm asking from from another field perspective. So is it well known what triggers these type of instabilities?
Well, there is a well-established theory that dates back around 2000, 2004, is this peeling, ballooning instability, where basically there is an interplay between the toroidal current and the gradient of the plasma pressure at the pedestal. The pedestal is a location basically between the core and the very outer part that is called the scrape-off layer. So the gradient of the plasma pressure in that region, together with the current that the toroidal current that there is in the plasma gives rise to this dynamic and pretty complex equilibria, but that we can study. So in theory, we can predict the type of elm that you are expecting according to these parameters. This is very simple words, of course, but this theory, I believe, is fairly well established, but the transport of the elm in the scrape-off layer region and in the divertor is the region at the bottom of the machine. It's still not fully unknown, but it's very much work in progress.
So I'm curious then if you know there is any theoretical considerations for how the transport works in that region, or I mean, there's always the 2-point model, which is very simplified. There's always I think someone wanted to run like gyrokinetic simulations to get the radial transport and all this sorts of stuff. But I think the question that I have to you mostly is, since your work is based mostly on experimental stuff, do you find that what people say from theoretical considerations is what you see in the device, or are they often very different?
I would say the order 0, they are correct, at least on a qualitative level, indeed. So to give let's see, a straightforward example, something relatively simple. If we imagine the elm being these filaments, these big fat filaments that eject in the outer part of the plasma and that travel following magnetic field lines all the way to the bottom. This simple model is not reproduced by experiments, basically never. Sometimes with attachment, but that's another story. But theory says that these filaments actually can undergo fragmentation, is called. So you basically generate smaller filaments with higher radial velocity, yet carrying a lot of power. And those filaments can indeed be deposited in regions far from where you would expect the majority of the heat flux, which are the strike points. And we observe this consistently in our measurements and in our analysis. And recently, my boss hired a very talented kid, master student from France, and he's doing simulations with a code called Bout++ that takes into account the nonlinear parts of the elm evolution, which is extremely important, at least to have some sort of theoretical model to compare our data with. Hopefully finding,
So this is like kinetic codes, I think massively parallelized probably. How do you capture this?
I'm not an expert about Bout++, honestly. What I do so of course I focus on experiment, but now I'm also validating a code that is being used at ITER. It's relatively crude, yet great, I think. It's called the PLM, which stands for Parallel Loss Model. It basically, given some inputs, it can produce the heat flux, the energy flux produced by a single elm event only due to parallel transport, which simplifies the problem very much and makes it computationally very cheap, very fast, very light. And, the bulk of it is being validated successfully. That works great. However, it does underpredict a good 30–40% of the total power that we measure. And that power is deposited in regions that are not expected. And so in order to address that, we need more sophisticated codes like this Bout++ thing.
Okay, I have a more general question actually, because you mentioned before different machines, right, that are built around the world at MIT, in UK as well, and your place, D3D and so on. And it seems to me all these different machines are based on different magnetic configuration. So is there something that you think is really promising in the field? or that can lead to a breakthrough?
Yeah, so, well, you know, I'm not an expert of the core of the plasma. Aaron is, but for what concerns, you know, the scrape-off layer and the diverter stuff, I do think that, you know, a double null is a promising way to go, simply because your power flux is shared among more area of the walls. So that must be beneficial for the, you know, for the survival of the machine walls themselves. Another thing that we are, not we as a group, but here at D3D, we are studying is this concept called small angle slot diverter. So instead of having a relatively open diverter where the magnetic field lines intersect the material, you have it closed like a little box, open only in one side. And that is basically used to maintain a high enough neutral pressure inside this box. And therefore, the heat loads expected on the surface of on the materials are lower. That, though, has implication with confinement and other issues because there is the leakage of these neutrals and all kind of stuff.
I mean, but
I think
that's very similar to like the baffles methodology or the vapor box, even for if you study the liquid metals.
Totally. But liquid metals, if I may, it's a little bit, you know, further
too far out there.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, you know. Yeah. No,
I was gonna say Luca's question was very, very tough to answer. Right? Do you believe that there are a breakthrough? Everyone believes there's a breakthrough coming, right?
Yeah, true. But I mean, I'm talking about someone outside of the field. I don't know. It's I see all these stellarator, and then at MIT they're trying much higher magnetic fields, right? Then ITER, I think it's even different. And I don't know. It seems that this affects, as you said, all the transport of charged particles, right? There can be anomalous transport of the instabilities and so on. And also the physics probably is not well known, right? When you're dealing with turbulent transport.
But this is what I'm curious about. Actually, that you mentioned this guy doing the Boat plus modeling. It seems like in order to capture these very complicated and nonlinear effects, you need to start using more and more complex codes. And I would think that it comes to a point where in order to make a fully predictive model for like the future design of fusion power plants, if you're gonna need to run such complicated models, it makes it hard.
It's faster to build another machine.
Exactly, right? At this point,
it's the experiment.
So do you feel that it's going that way? That it's sort of there are so many minor, or not minor, that they are large effects, but they all add up to a point where there is no replacement for just building a physical machine to test it.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So, I mean, personally, I think that being pragmatic is a good thing to do. To give a, you know, a real life example, very much related to what we already discussed. On one hand, you have complicated codes, let's say about plus to study L dynamics. On the other hand, you have this simpler 1D fluid code, this parallel loss model. If we think, what do engineers care most in a scenario of power load deposition? Is the peak, is the location where the heat loads is at its maximum. This 1D fluid code can reproduce that peak fairly accurately, which is great news. So I would say, to be hardcore pragmatic, boom, that's fine. That's what you need. Let's go for it. However, for a more complete and also long-term type of tokamak development, I think it's very important to understand as much as we can about these instabilities, because those elements can really be, you know, the go or no go thing. They are very delicate. Also, on that regard, there is that also links with Luca's question. There is this relatively new regime called grassy elms regime, where instead of having these low frequency, huge elms called type 1, you have these very high frequency and way smaller elms. The term grassy, I believe it comes from, like the grass, like you have all these little peaks, and that can actually exhaust the power and the ash from the tokamak without posing any serious concern to the machine walls. However, to get to that regime and to maintain and control it is not that straightforward, of course. But lots of studies are being done in that direction, and especially it seems to be easier to achieve in quasi-double null configuration, which also links again to what we discussed a couple of minutes ago about this double X point configuration stuff.
But that was interesting question, because it makes me think also where my community or low temperature plasma people is going. That I think we are some years lagging behind the fusion community in some aspects, but I see already a lot of people pushing towards 3D models, so highly parallelized models. And I would argue that yes, this is a direction where we should go. But we should always think that, in a model, there are some assumptions that maybe are not always applicable to your case, but still, if you use that simplified model, you can learn something out of it. So sometimes we do 0D or 1D model, right? So, I mean, you're familiar, Renato. And maybe your system is not cannot be described by 0D, but we can learn something out of it. And I think that it's important that in physics or engineering that we still have this level of simplification at the end. So not everything from first principles.
Word. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, you are right. You are right.
But Renato, so you said you changed a bit the topic of your PhD, right? When you moved from PhD to postdoc.
Yeah.
So in which respect? So what were you doing during PhD that is different?
Well, I was doing the PhD at Differ Institute with you guys, where there is a very nice linear plasma machine. To be not kind, but I mean, we may define it as a divertor simulator. The divertor is the part where is the region of the walls where magnetic field lines intersect the walls themselves, and therefore is where plasma surface interactions would occur. So Magnum PSI is fantastic and I think unique in the world to study the material aspect, the material sciences aspect of these plasma surface interaction studies. However, in my PhD, I focused what occurs right before the plasma reaches the plate, the target, let's say. In particular, I focused on plasma neutrals interactions and how can this be beneficial or not to the power loads to this target. Okay. It was very much plasma chemistry oriented.
So now that you compare your work on linear machine and your work on Tokamaks, what do you find as different? So I mean, maybe I don't want to enter into political but so do you think this work on linear machine can also be beneficial, can give information also for studying on this power exhaust into the divertors of tokamaks, or is this really too much of a simplification?
I think they can be extremely important. Similarly to what you, Luca, just mentioned about starting with a simple scenario before trying to build, the castle. Linear machines can be great. However, on a personal level, I do think that the fusion community doesn't really properly pay attention to what is being studied in linear machines in terms of plasma physics, not material sciences. Okay. Right, okay. Because from the material science point of view, is perfect.
There is a lot to learn. Exactly.
Yeah, material science is the way to go. But also from the plasma physics aspects, actually, especially in the last part of the magnetic flux surface, of the last part, let's say, of the plasma path from the outer scrape-off layer to the divertor. Because what happens in the very vicinity of the plate is very important, and that can really be a game changer in the survival of your walls, you know. And linear machines are way easier to run. The diagnostics accessibility is basically great. So you can really properly pinpoint all the parameters. And so basically you have a very well defined and controlled scenario, which can also be great for validating models that can then be applied in a more complex tokamak type of thing.
True. That's a good answer, I think. Yeah.
Maybe I would like to ask, just from your experience, Renato, like in what sense in that region? Like I'm not much of a plasma surface interaction kind of person, but maybe your work delves into it. Like what in there is important in terms of the survivability of the diverter plates?
Thanks for the question. Well, in order to reply to that, we cannot not mention plasma detachment. So plasma detachment, in very simple words, in few words, is a scenario that you develop in the diverter, that now we know what the diverter is, where basically your incoming plasma, this plasma carries a lot of ions, electrons, high power. It's bad for the walls, especially if we think for long pulses, like long operations. So detachment works in the sense that it cools down significantly this incoming plasma, and therefore what you get at the end is a tolerable particle and heat flux to your target. Now,
correct me if I'm wrong. So sorry, Renato, if I interrupt. So this detachment is achieved by seeding impurities or by other means?
There are different ways. You can increase the density at the pedestal with a density ramp. You can also seed impurities that are highly radiative, like nitrogen, neon. Why? Because those impurities leads to this plasma to radiate, so to lose a lot of power throughout its path towards the diverter. And when the temperature is low enough, which this connects to Aaron's question, when the temperature is low enough and you have some neutrals, so non-charged particles in front of this target, so-called recombination mechanisms occur. So you basically convert ions that leads, of course, a potential into neutrals. First, these neutrals do not follow the magnetic field lines, so you can spread this power over a larger surface area, therefore diminishing the peak load.
As long as they don't enter the core, I think, right? Because otherwise they get ionized and it's all of a mess.
Yeah, they can, yes, indeed, they can, like they say, contaminate the core. You don't want these impurities or too many neutrals goes up, as Aaron well knows, of course. And there is also another thing called MARF, or MARFE in Italian, which is basically when your X point starts to radiate too much, you basically end up having a disruption, or let's say your plasma will never do fusion. I mean, it's completely unacceptable. So it's very tricky.
So then these linear machines can help study that detachment behavior, you think?
Yes, so it's important here to make a point. Linear machines can be fantastic to study what occurs in the last part of the plasma path from the outer midplane to the target. So when recombination becomes dominant. But linear machines are not, I mean, you cannot study the wall detachment phenomenon in a linear machine. That would be, I think it's also out of the scope. There are so many processes that goes on already in this recombination region that we don't know exactly, that this already gives linear machines, an important role, in my opinion. But again, this role, I don't think it's well enough recognized by the community, especially by the Tokamak community.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
I think, yeah, the delineation between the diverter configuration in the tokamak and the linear plasma is hard to define. And maybe that's why the community just sort of says, okay, we don't worry about that and we worry only about the diverter configuration. But I think if you're able to clearly separate where the two devices are at least somewhat identical in their physics, then you can more easily target, types of studies or specific phenomenon to study in the linear machines. And I think that might be one way to help bring the focus back a little bit to linear machines and their capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, totally, I fully agree.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, again, somewhat linking to what we were discussing before about this having a pragmatic approach. It's also true that if something is working in a tokamak and the attachment is being achieved and everything works fine, even if you don't exactly know the fundamental physics behind it, but it is working, fuck it, let's go for it.
Yeah, it's an
Right?
engineering
I mean,
approach.
right?
Engineering approach. Yeah.
Yeah, we ideally we should make fusion soon. So of course, understanding fundamental processes is great and very important in the long term. But in the short term, I also think that this engineeristic approach is also a nice way to go. I mean, it works like this.
And by the way, did you find some differences in doing research in the US with respect to Europe? No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you care to elaborate? I would be curious.
Yeah. Now, well, I mean, I think that the Netherlands and IFER also is a special place because, lots of outstanding things get done. You guys publish a lot of important things, and it's a magic place, Said so, the life work balance is very much a Dutch style thing, which is very, loose. You take your time, you do, you see what I mean? There is a lot of calm.
Freedom. Yeah.
Freedom.
You can manage yourself as you want. Yeah, I experienced also during my PhD.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, here as well, but I work for a university, so we are lucky enough to have somehow some sort of the same luck. But in general, here, in a good way, I'm saying, but there is a lot of competition. Competitivity here is high.
I mean, to become staff, you mean, and to have a position inside the institute.
Yeah. And
trust me, I know I went the other way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I started
right?
there and I moved to Europe. So I get what you mean. I know exactly.
Yeah, man. One of the first things that my boss told me when I started my postdoc here is like, do great or go home. Which is, okay, cool. Okay, but what the fuck? Yeah. But as everything, we are, I think that routine is something that we all develop. If this, let's call it hard work, but if you love what you do, it's not really so hard work. But if you are consistent in your productivity, a good thing about here in US is that they will keep you. They will keep you. There is meritocracy is sky high here, is top as I have ever seen, So
I think
pros and cons.
Yeah, that also pushes the competition higher, right? If you see that the rewards really only go to the people who perform the best, that puts pressure on everyone to be there, right? To get that.
Yeah.
And I think
don't we need a little bit of pressure, Aaron, in scientific research?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
especially in what we do.
The healthy pressure. I mean, the healthy enthusiasm, the healthy
Exactly,
driving
exactly. Yeah.
force to do
No,
a
there
better job.
absolutely. There's a degree, some competitive, friendly competition is always nice because then you can always say, "Ha, I beat you. I got you." But but at the same time, it's not. It should not progress to the point where it's overwhelming,
I
or
agree.
toxic.
Yeah, true. Then Renato, so we were saying, so I also experience myself, and I'm also driven by enthusiasm when I do research and so on, by interest also to solve some problems. But sometimes there are also for me moments of frustration because I don't know, because I cannot solve this problem immediately. Maybe I want to solve it, I want to have the results, and how you deal with it. Because on the one hand, you have pressure to get results because you want to get a position maybe there, or you want to become a sort of established person in your field. And on the other hand, you have to deal with these challenges in research, right? So I saw
Yeah.
you were always enthusiastic of what you were doing. So can you tell us something about that?
So you mean how to
how,
deal
how
with
did you
this?
deal with it?
Well, now I I take into account that one day a month I will be willing to leave everything and go to Naples and work in a pizzeria for the rest of my life and chilling Italy and staying there. For the rest, I think it's very much also a matter of the colleagues that you have surrounding you.
Mhm.
As also Aaron was mentioning, like if you are in a, let's say, toxic environment, maybe it's a tough word, but you can have all the enthusiasm you want, but you may eventually end up hating what you're doing. And I think that to do cool stuff in science, you really have to like a lot. Like you like, it's not even like at this point, I think at our, postdocs after a PhD, basically, I don't even think that you need a supervisor that pushes you to improve what you're doing.
No,
It
you need to
comes
have the passion.
spontaneously by
Exactly.
yourself, like saying,
Yeah.
let me read this another time better. And then maybe, that's another breakthrough. And so it may take a little bit more time to write your paper and publish your research, but you tend to make the best out of it according to your potentials.
Yeah.
We are all
No,
different.
because I don't know, talking also with younger people, it seems to me that there are a lot of people, even very good, very good students, but they are a bit afraid of pursuing this career in research because there are a lot of unknowns, right? So they say, okay, if I go to industry, for example, I can get a job much easily, and I know what I have to do in order to progress in my career. Whereas in research, you don't know most of the time. So do you think we should be so much afraid, or you think still the path is worth?
I think it's the best thing ever happened to me. It's
Okay.
beyond worth. It's awesome. I mean, of course, for more stability, maybe go to industry is also nice. But this is my very personal and therefore limited point of view. I think that the vast majority of technical works in industries are extremely boring. Like, what the fuck?
It's maybe okay, yeah. It's
I mean,
like every day you have the same task,
I
probably.
mean,
I don't know.
but even, you have to optimize a product to be more sellable, or I don't want to care about that ever, you know. Well,
Yeah, it
research
depends
is
what you
great
like,
because,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, because you basically can never sit back. You can never, I mean, you can relax. We do relax often, but there is always something new to be addressed and to be, pursued. While it's not the case in industry. On the other hand, each one of us has different background and personal histories. Maybe a super talented physicist needs to make good money right after the bachelor's or right after a master's degree. That's a very good call to go to industry and make good bucks. straight out of university. But I think that if one likes what is studying and has the motivation to continue that, it's a relatively easy path, honestly. I really cannot see all these gigantic, massive obstacles. They are not really there, I think.
So do you see that research is sort of an outlet for creativity in a way, right? Because there is so much new going on, and you can always try something else. There, you have really an open book in front of you, right? Do you see it as that, or is it more of just like you, for you, more of a technical thing? Like, I want to know what's happening. How do you see research?
I think the former, completely. To make like a personal example, simple one. At the beginning of my postdoc here, I was supposed to write a quick paper, like within the first 3 to 6 months, just doing some analysis of some, diagnostic data and take out a paper. But doing that analysis, we saw interesting stuff that were not expected. So we investigated further that. And while investigating that, we found other unknown aspects of the similar topic, of the same topic, basically. And so that basically, it's a never-ending process. And you need to be creative even to highlight what is new, because it's not always like, in front of your face, like a super new, strange, perfect results. No, you have to dig. But if you dig properly, and if you know how to identify what is not expected, meaning that you did your homework also, though, that you studied what you had to study, it's never ending. That's why it's so beautiful, right?
Yeah.
That's the main difference between the industry stuff. We are generalizing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Of course.
For me, I don't know what you think, guys. Just comparing, for example, art and a bit more scientific or technical field. I think in our field, it's true that I agree with you, Renato. I think it's very creative, because you have different problems or challenges, and you have to think a way how to solve it. And people, maybe you're the first one trying to tackle this problem, right? So it is very exciting. So you have to come up with a new idea. So it's very creative. But probably in our field, you need a lot of background before start seeing these interesting problems. You know what I mean? So
yes,
I mean, you have to deal with a lot of study of books, I mean, doing also a bit more school or elementary stuff before arriving at that level, right? Whereas in the art, maybe I'm I'm not an artist, so maybe I'm wrong. Whereas in the art, you can paint something and
Luca, I would like to hug you now, because I really agree with you 100%. And I discovered recently, like in the last year or two, that I was wrong. What do I mean? Let's make an example. Like, let's say, interior design, right? To me, is a couch. Maybe it's fancy. No, maybe it's fancy, with some detail.
Yeah, but if people doing design of interior couches want to sponsor this channel, I mean, for me, I like really much.
I also need a new couch, so.
Or even, let's say, more like even in the contemporary art world, the visual art world of contemporary art, lots of things to me make little sense, or at least I really cannot extract any beauty or any novelty about it. Sad so, lots of my friends here in San Diego are in the art world, not into science.
Okay.
But if you have an artistic background and you know what you are looking at, you can extract so many informations, background on the artist, references really to other artists or to other periods of history characterized by a certain type of art. So bottom line, Luke, I agree with you, because I have the same mindset, but I think we are both wrong.
True. That's true. I never thought about that because I thought, okay, science is a sort of a collective idea, right? So it's creative, but you have to build on top of what has been done before. You cannot arrive and have a new disruptive idea without knowing what has been done, right? It's crazy. I thought, okay, art, you can come here and being a Picasso, but it's not completely true because you need also to know and you need to have a, that's true.
Very much. It's,
also in the music, I think it's like that, right?
Yeah, in the music, indeed, although now with this trap shit.
Okay, anyway.
Music, that's, I don't know. Let's say, but in the actual music, indeed, it's the same thing, absolutely.
So there are similarities in that sense.
Very much.
I think for the majority of people, it's going to be that way, that you have to study a lot what has come before you and really immerse yourself in that world. And then maybe you can make something after you've gained all the knowledge. But I mean, okay, there's always some people who are just somehow geniuses and they just bam, right? But that's a rarity
in every field.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's in every field also.
Yeah, but it's a rarity for the majority of people.
What do you think? So do you believe actually in genius? Because I think I don't know what I think about it, because I don't believe very much into like that someone is born with a specific talent in a specific field. I think if you put enough effort and time, you can achieve good results.
Yeah, I agree with that. The genius part, I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist or something.
Exactly.
But I don't know. It's also, it's about language, definition of genius. What does it mean?
Exactly.
It's vague. I don't know.
Well, like in some ways, it's not pure genius, because it's also possible, especially in scientific fields, that you become so closed that everybody in the field thinks a certain way. And sometimes it takes someone who is from the outside to come in and reintroduce fresh ideas, fresh ways of looking at things. And you could see those people, if you're too narrow-minded, as geniuses, because where did this idea come from? How did you think about this? But actually, they just have a different background. They just come from a different place and think a little differently than you. But it doesn't make them like immediately super high level, but their ideas are introducing important things, important differences. So I think that is very important in the community, to encourage people from all places to come and try. Maybe actually, it doesn't work, but
this is interesting, because I had a similar conversation with some colleagues here, right? And we were discussing about is it important, in order to have a career in research, so a lot of people say you have to focus on one topic and become the expert of that topic without looking too much around, right? And then you are the expert of power exhaust in Tokamaks, the world leader, whatever. Other people say that we need this sort of influence from other fields, right? So you have a lot of inputs from other fields, and then you can get ideas that you bring from one field to another, as you were saying, Aaron. So what do you think, Renato? Do you think that having inputs also from different fields is beneficial to become a researcher, or is it better to focus on one topic based on your experience?
I think that's a very nice question,
I think there's not a unique answer, probably, right?
So of course, having a broad perspective is very important in order to be able to think out of the box, which is basically what Aaron was saying. Said so, to study something like plasma physics and being also familiar with another completely different topic that may also be related, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, if you now start doing biology, is
right, it's very difficult. So that's why I think that this thinking out of the box thing can indeed be coming from a genius-minded type of individual, but besides that, also a very super hardcore educated individual, because you know you have laws to follow basically, and so ideally yes. On the other hand, to make different worlds to communicate, let's say plasma chemistry and nuclear fusion, it's also very difficult, even like logistically. Where do you make them meet? How, who chairs that? Who, because competencies are so different that there may be very little common ground to have fruitful discussions. It's very tricky, it's difficult. I was lucky during my PhD having Ivo as a supervisor, because he had this very broad thinking about this very specific and complicated problem, but indeed we gave a more plasma chemistry approach, although it's purely in the field of plasma physics.
Okay. So you think there will be a sort of need of people also in fusion with a sort of competencies that are at the edge between different fields, or should we focus?
No,
so do you think is a trend that is ongoing, or is it too far in the future?
No, I think it's happening now to some extent. Like you know, a disruption person that is in contact with Reiter from Germany, I think that is a great, you know, collisional radiative modeler and so on. That's already very nice and promising. You see what I mean? Like two topics that as a first glance appear to be so distant actually share a lot of fundamental physics in common. And so it's wonderful to see how one field can help each other and vice versa, you know? But it's not a straightforward thing. Again, it's not trivial.
No, it's interesting because it reminds me that in this channel, like months ago, I had this discussion with Savino Longo. He's a professor in Bari, and he always said the same, because he's always jumping from, I don't know, chemistry to biology to physics, mathematics, whatever. And he's like, I like, you know, all these sort of having ideas, bring it from one, you know, field to another. but he said in Italy is also not well received by all the scientific community, right? Because they prefer to be, you are the expert of this topic, you're the expert of plasma physics, right? So why are you thinking about astrobiology?
Wow. Yeah, but you know, I mean, Prof. Savino Longo is also a living legend. You know, I mean, those are rare cases, in my opinion, like genius type of thing, you know. It's very uncommon to be at that level and jumping around at that level of competence. I think is outstanding and almost unique, right?
At the same time, I would ask if you think it should be encouraged to some level in either the education or in the way we do research, or do you think that it is better to just get your focus, get your specialization in a way, and then maybe after that you branch out?
Yeah, I would consider the latter that you propose. So you first solve a difficult problem, very specific. In order to understand the problem and go in deep in there, you have to study lots of fundamental aspects of that problem, which are for sure connected with other fields. After you develop, you know, also the confidence, but the tools to solve that problem, let's say your PhD path, then you can start build a more, let's say, broad and open vision of the problem that is above the little problem you were working on. And then maybe one day you can go further above. And that's why I think, you know, that's what big guys in our field do, which I think is very difficult.
I think that's the most meaningful also, because we should not give a message that, you know, you can think about doing everything. So I think in order to have a career and so on, and also for your name to be known by the community, you need to focus on a specific area, because it's, knowledge is so broad. There are so many different topics.
Yeah,
And
at
then
least starting.
you can, I think I agree with you. Yeah.
At least starting from a very specific point, and
I
then
think
you
so.
move upwards or backwards to have a larger perspective in time. But at the beginning, it should be very specific, I think.
Okay, so I want to conclude with a couple of more questions. So first of all, it's very interesting because we are from the same town, right? In Italy,
Yeah,
Bassano del Grappa.
Bassano, what's up?
So there are a lot of people, that started there. It's quite surprising, then they start a field in plasma physics or other fields, right? Or music or whatever. And do you think, what do you think about the environment in Bassano? Was that important for you to grow up and for your career? Do you miss Bassano actually sometimes?
Yeah, I miss the people there, of course. And I mean, Bassano gave us a huge alcohol tolerance, for sure, which is very important.
Very important, I was going to say.
Yeah, also very important, in conferences or anything, because the more you can, maintain your cool, the more you can have meaningful conversations with legends in the game that are just chilling at the bar. And so, fun enough, but I really think that that matters in a very little extent, of course. I think that, Bassano is a kind of a strange place, man. There is
it's very
on
interesting
one end,
because we are both from a small town, right? So moving from Bassano to San Diego, for example, how was that? Is that shocking for you or?
No, zero shocking, actually. But there are zero similarities. There is not a single thing that I can, although I found a place here that sells the Acqua di Cedro. Anyways, this is just a parenthesis for me and Luca. So zero similarities. On the other hand, though, I think that Bassano, despite the dimension, has always had a pretty vibrant subcultural scene in there, from the techno scene, the rock scene, the hip hop scene, the art scene.
That's true. It's quite exactly.
So
I remember,
on the other, to be frank though, it also has a lot of bigotry, and lots of people are very conservative, and it has, let's say, in this sense, it has, in that little place, there are lots of different things that normally would characterize the bigger city. And
that's true. If you have a specific interest, you can find, most likely, even if it is a small town, you can find people with your similar interest. I remember I was taking the train. We have the group of this bunch of people doing physics, and every morning take the train from Bassano to Padua, right? And back for 5 years. And so on. But if you do music, you can find people and have a band. It's quite easily.
It's cute. It's cute. I would never live there now, though. Never.
No, of course it's okay. Okay, and then the second question is that. So, what about this fusion? Because here we have a bet among friends about ether. About this Q equals 10 of ether.
Yeah, Luca, you're gonna owe us dinner,
what do you think? Because I think, I mean, of course, I come from low temperature plasma, so I'm the least expert here in the field, but I think it will be really challenging to reach that goal for ether, in my opinion. What do you think about it? And when do you see a commercial fusion that will be available? I mean,
2080.
Okay.
80. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not bad.
I mean,
it's better than never. Let's put it that way. Some people say never.
Yeah, but I mean, all due respect, but fuck them. I mean, don't say that.
No, exactly.
I mean, but this ether thing, it's way above, beyond my my really complete understanding of this huge thing. From a little side, though, I think that even if this Q equals 10 is not going to be reached, so many super important aspects will be better understood with it. So it is still very much worth to be done that. For the Q equals 10, who can know now? I think nobody can actually know. You can be more, pessimistic or optimistic. You can have a gut feeling, but we really don't know.
Okay. Well, so there is a lot of research to do. So with this, thank you very much, Renato, for your time. It was really pleasant to talk with you, and thank you, Aaron, as well, for supporting this conversation, giving more fusion insights. And
it was great to be here and see Renato again. So this is
and I had also
nice
laugh
guys.
and so on.
Thank you,
I hope to have a chat with you soon again.
Anytime.
And good luck with your life and your research in San Diego, Renato, and see you soon in Bassano, maybe.
You too. Yeah, hell yeah. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.